Our last topic will be on the gravitational distortions and how they affect the rings. Here we can very clearly see two shepherd moons, Prometheus and Pandora, as they are having these fascinating tugs on the F rings of Saturn. So let's give you some proper definitions. Rings are kept stable by the shepherd moons. Left alone, the rings could fall apart, collapse in on themselves, or in the ice cases, literally melt from exposure to sunlight. So shepherd moons have multiple effects on these rings. One thing the shepherd moons can do is keep them nice and stable, but they're going to have these gravitational distortions that you can see in this animation as they fly by. Let's go ahead and let it repeat. Watch Prometheus, that's the inner one. Watch the ring carefully around here, and you see this bend kind of fly through the arc of the rings. What's happening is that there's a strong gravitational pull here, being slightly counterbalanced by the shepherd moon Pandora. And so you create these ripples through the ring systems. One of these distortions that you can see when the moons fly by are these scallop shapes. And here, let's go ahead and highlight it here. You can see this kind of scalloping effect as it goes around the rings. So the scallops is this what we would expect to be these nice, perfectly round rings that get distorted into these scallop shapes, and it's this complex interplay of the two shepherd moons and tugging, creating these bends and arcs on the distribution of matter in the rings. Another distortion we can see is these spokes. As you see here, they kind of look like shadows in the ring. Now, what are these shadows? What's our understanding of these? Let's go ahead and draw this out. Let's say we're looking at Saturn here, and let's draw the plane that the rings are rotating in. So on this side of this perspective, the rings are floating out of your screen, and then come over here and they'll be floating into the ring. So you have this rotation of the rings in your screen, out of your screen. Now let me switch up colors. What happens to some material? Right? The spokes will grow in this radial direction. What do we mean by that? We're saying that as you go out along the radius, the spokes will get bigger and bigger. But what is this shade? What's happening? Well, what's happening is that something is causing the material of the ring to either rise up above the horizon of the plane of the rings or fall below. Could be one or the other. Just depends on the perspective you're seeing these spokes at. And so material in the ring is being pushed up or pushed down. And what we suspect is that these are electrostatic forces. Something is causing these rings to become charged as they're rotating around. And that charge will then, through a distribution of positive, negative charges, start to repel the matter. So some of the matter will get driven upwards by being just slightly electrostatically charged. And maybe it can spit that excess charge away or absorb some photons and start to calm back down, go back to electrically neutral, and fall back into place. So we'll comment on the stability of the rings. The reason we call the shepherd moons shepherds is because they're trying to help stabilize the rings. Because on their own, the rings just will not last forever. You have billions and billions of little particles, and they'll smash into each other and obliterate into tinier pieces. The icy parts of the rings, the frozen materials, hey, if they're exposed to enough sunlight, they could just melt into a gas. As a gas, they're free, if they're moving fast enough, to just float away from the ring systems once they've been broken up into tinier pieces. Other things they can find in terms of stability of the rings, look at the gaps. These can be produced by a problem called orbital resonances. Think of vibrations. You have an object and you get it to resonate. This is very well known for any musicians out there. You're getting your string instrument, the string itself, to resonate at the right frequency to get the harmony, the tunes we like. Well, there is a mathematically similar result in orbits. You can talk about the frequency of their orbits, and if you get resonances, these orbital patterns matching and resonating together, that can drive material to create these gaps. Coming down to this image here, another great one. This was the Shepherd Moon Prometheus, and it's gravitationally stealing matter away from the Shepherd Moon. So while the gravitational presence of Prometheus can help stabilize the rings, it's simultaneously stealing matter away from the ring. So in conclusion, we see these rings out there. A planet like Earth, terrestrial, we will not have these rings because we lack any shepherd moons that can house the material, keep them in place, keep them on their resonances, and keep replacing that material. Think back to Enceladus earlier in this section, how Enceladus geysers are venting water and gas into the rings of Saturn. There's something there to help support its existence. So wrapping things up, pulling it all together, our moon probably formed by a giant impact on Earth, a Mars-sized object, hit a proto-Earth, and that material, eventually coalesced into our now present Earth and our moon. And looking across the solar system, we have found over 200 moons with a wide range of characteristics. Some are big enough to be effectively planets with their own atmospheres. Others are weird balls of rocks. We can almost think of them as asteroids that were captured by the planet. Heck, they're even rotating in the wrong direction. They have retrograde orbits around their planets. So we categorize moons by their regular or irregulars. The regulars being material that probably accreted around the same time as the planets, whereas the irregulars are most likely captured objects. And we definitely know an irregular moon when we see it rotating in the wrong direction. The rings on the giant planets, these are tiny particles of ice and dust. And they're very likely moons that went beyond the tidal limits and were tidally ripped apart. And these rings, being just billions and billions of tiny little particles, are heavily affected by gravitational distortions. The presence of a shepherd moon swinging by will have a great influence on the distribution of matter in the rings. And you'll get those effects like the scallops or potentially spokes, though that's more likely an electrostatic effect. So with that, we'll call it into section 11, and I'll see you all next time.